Today's episode of the Mind Sculptors podcast is brought to you by TCG Player, your source for all your trading card game needs. Please consider using our link in the description for your next purchase, as it helps support the continued refinement of our show. This episode is also made possible through the gracious support of our Patreon members. If you wish to join this esteemed group, simply visit patreon.com/The Mind Sculptors and become part of the SCULPTY family today. And of course, if you prefer a simpler gesture, we invite you to subscribe, leave a like and comment on YouTube, or leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts as a most fitting offering to the ever-watchful algorithm Jesus.
Because we weren't here last week, and when we recorded last week, results have not come in yet enough time. Just gotta say, the Bucks, national champions, let's fucking go. Beat the Fighting Irish. OHIO.
Oh, and I, as a Philadelphia native, must also point out that the Phillies. Not the Phillies, Jesus Christ, the Eagles
baseball team.
The Eagles just broke a record with the most points scored in any AFC or NFC championship last night. So go Birds.
Birds, Chiefs in the playoffs. What? Okay, so I'm going to go on a tangent about the NFL for a second. Welcome everybody to Mind Sculptors. I'm Cal.
I'm the Philadelphia himself.
The Philadelphia himself. Yesterday, so the Chiefs won yesterday, right? And everybody likes to go on these like rants on Twitter about how, and Twitter and Blue Sky or whatever, about how, the NFL rigs the games for the Chiefs. And I just am like, listen, if the NFL rigged games, they would not be rigging them for the small market Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, right.
And here's why I know that they don't rig the games. The most popular team in the NFL, the Dallas Cowboys, have not been to the Super Bowl or remotely close to a Super Bowl in 30 years. Yep. Guys, it's not rigged. Like, it's just teams are good. I don't know what to tell you. Like, it is what it is. Anyway, I just had to get that out of my system because I know there's like a handful of people who listen that are sports fans that will have thoughts about that. And I want to make sure I got it out there into the zeitgeist, my thoughts before the Super Bowl. So
amen.
Hallelujah. So anyway, you are going to an event in Colorado? This weekend?
Yeah, one of the big CO,
Yeah. South of Nebraska.
It's probably true.
No, it 100% is true.
Yeah, I believe you.
So you're playing in an event out there, and Ian sometimes he's just got the big dumb and doesn't know what to play at the event. So he comes to me.
Big dumb. Yeah.
He's the big smart and asks for.
Yeah.
So we're gonna look at some decks today and kind of give some tournament prep on what we're thinking going into this event.
Yeah, Cal is very generous with their time, and sometimes I show up to record and go, "Hey, can we just talk about what I'm going to play this weekend?"
Sure.
And also, I think it is a fun little journey for viewers to go on and see, like, me as a tournament grinder, right? All these things that like go through my head as I like pick a deck, go through this process, right?
But this is literally conversations Ian and I have with like Phoenix in our group chat, like literally every week before.
I gotta say, Cal, you've been slacking a little bit in the chat.
I have been slacking a bit in the chat recently.
Yeah.
That is because the brewing has been the big reanimating Hashaton deck that I don't believe in that build of the deck. So
Well, yeah, it also, you know, in your defense, Jeremy and I are particularly the type of crackheads who enjoy Karlach, and it took you a while to get on that boat.
It
So it was like
really
2
took me a
weeks
while
straight.
to buy in on Karlach. You guys were really going deep
Yeah,
in the tank
yeah.
on Karlach, and I was like, all right, guys, whatever you say.
I think as soon as we hit Morog from Fury of Akum, I think that was when you were like, well, okay.
Yeah, when I saw that interaction, I was like, okay, you might have something.
Yeah, so less crackheady ideas here are I'm heading out to the Snowy Summit 5K. Obviously, you know, a little bit of background for where I'm at just as a player right now. Like I don't like to go to too larger tournaments in a row and feel like, for example, I was willing to play Karlach at the last one because I felt good about the deck. I'd put up some decent results with it, but it's obviously a much more experimental list, much more fringe list, et cetera, right? So when I go into a tournament twice in a row, I don't like to maybe gamble as hard, right? I'm still willing
Mhm.
to bring something spicier, something more innovative, but I'm not exactly willing to 100% roll the dice, right? Um, so let's talk about the two that I started with, and then we can go to like how that's evolved so far,
Right.
right? So this one I'm not going to talk about too much, but I've been messing around with a Sisay list,
Mhm.
and we're just gonna do the name for now because this one I'm still gonna sandbag a little bit as far as information on is concerned. But
Mhm.
basically, I've been messing around with Sisay in the current metagame, and the idea with this version is that I'm taking it into more of like a hybrid space, as you can like tell by the sort of comedic name, which is like having some of the good stuff nature that you would see in a deck like Clam Chowder, but not going as far, and it's not just
Right.
basically being bad Kenrith, right? It's still, you know, using Planeswalker lines and stuff like that, just, you know, attempting to up the card quality, right? And I got this list together. I threw it in our group chat and I said, you know, this is really, I think, something that I think is kind of real. But to be honest, it is just not sparking any joy with me right now looking at the deck. Um,
Yeah.
and for me, that's a big thing, right? And I think this is genuinely real for tournament players. It's like if you are playing a list and it is not making the gears move, like for me personally, that's especially really hard, right?
Right.
So I said, you know, it's really not sparking any joy, and therefore I'm not going to enjoy playing it. I'm not going to be excited about going into the tournament, playing my deck, et cetera, et cetera. And even if I do well, I wouldn't be excited about like, oh, hey, here's my deck, right? So,
Yeah.
not that I'm saying that I'm incapable of feeling that way towards this list. I'm just not feeling that way right now,
Right.
and therefore it makes me want to go, okay, let's do something else for right
Well, in your defense, this
now. Mhm.
list is very it is not like really that wild of what you would think, like of changes. Like it's little
Yeah,
tweaks, you know what I mean? You're
yeah.
not really making huge changes to it. Um
If anything,
and
the omissions are more big than the inclusions, right? As
right.
far as the current metagame.
And I think that it is solid. I just
Yeah,
think that the biggest like critique I had of it was
yeah.
I think it has its feet in like you know, two different oceans.
Sure, sure.
And I think because of that, it might feel a little clunky and awkward at times.
Yeah.
Um,
I didn't find it to be, like, super clunky, but it's
yeah,
definitely not like, um, you know, it doesn't feel like whenever you see, like, a Kinnan curve out into, like, an Enduring Vitality, that's a level of synergy that you're not gonna feel with a deck like that, you know
right.
what I mean?
Well, and yeah, and I think that's one of the things about um this is when I say clunky, it's like Sisay used to feel like buttery smooth, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And I think this doesn't feel that way. And when you're playing Sisay, if Sisay doesn't feel buttery smooth,
yeah.
I'm a lot less keen to play it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I agree. Sisay, like, and I'm that's been my struggle with Sisay post ban is that without Dockside, it basically lost any pivot that it had, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think, and I was talking about this with Vice the other day, which was like, uh, I just don't know that it feels like the go wide strategy feels effective, right? Like if you look at a lot of
Yeah, I
people
agree.
pushing that strategy for Sisay, they're like doing decently in tournaments, but they're all like good players who are locked in the 18 to 22,
Right.
when they're trying to make top 16, and like they're all doing fine, but they're not putting up good results. They're putting
Right.
up acceptable results. And I don't think that's what I want from my 5 color deck, right? Like I want it
Yeah.
to be pushing a little harder. So hence me taking a big step away from some
Right.
of the stuff that's being currently worked on, right? And once again, I do kind of believe in this deck. Like it's one of those decks that I put together and I go, yeah, I think this solves the exact problem I'm trying to solve.
Hmm.
And also it's a little boring right now. So let me find something that's gonna stimulate me a little
Right.
bit more, right? Um,
ADHD.
so now that brings us to Tamtam.
Okay, you got to
Uh,
share this list with me though, so I can
yeah.
scroll it a little bit in the sidebar.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Um,
Let me take care of that right now. So Tamtam is a Tameo, the Inquisitive Student slash Tameo Seasoned Scholar list that I've been working on. I've been really fascinated with this card for a while. When it first
mhm,
came out, I didn't really get the appeal of it, but then I actually saw someone play it at my locals, and I was like, oh, there's actually some cute shit you can do with
mhm,
this card.
mhm.
Like, it's actually really fun. So here's where my position as a player is now contradicting with the things that spark my joy, right?
Mhm.
Because I see this deck and I'm very excited about this deck, and I will be bringing this deck to an event sometime soon, right?
Right.
The TLDR is that like to play Tamio as a cEDH commander, you're basically trying to get to that ult as quickly as possible, right? And when you have half of your deck in your hand, you should be able to win. We've all seen Peer into the Abyss work, right?
Right.
So a lot of the deck is sort of setting up controlling board states to have that sort of mid-range grind plan, and then eventually find a place where you can go, cool, flip Tameo. In a turn or two, I get to ultimate go off kind of
Mhm.
things, right? And there's different things that help with proliferating and things like deep low skate that double the counters on stuff and all that kind of nonsense, right? So like there's little synergies in here that explicitly accelerate the clock that you need to like make this viable.
Right.
The problem I'm having right now is, first of all, it's explicitly sorcery speed relegated, right?
Oh
Like
yeah,
you
100%.
have to do this at sorcery speed. Um, it's very good at what it does, right? Like I mean, you have a one mana commander, so it's insanely
Sure.
consistent. You've got things like Isochron Scepter lines as backup. You have your Hullbreaker Horror lines, which is nice because Hullbreaker Horror combos with a lot of things in the deck, so it's
Right.
almost impossible to really like, not impossible, I should say, but like it is very improbable that you whiff really hard on
Right.
Hullbreaker, even if you don't have Tameo online, and even though you don't have an outlet in the zone, right? There's just like a lot of things that it can channel into. And then there's sort of like this passive planeswalker plan with like, flipping these guys over and I actually don't, yeah, Ichor Moon Gauntlet and stuff like that that
Mhm.
gives all your
Mhm.
planeswalkers the 0 proliferate ability, right? So there's definitely ways to like achieve that critical nexus of ultimating way faster than one might expect.
Mhm.
And I'm really fascinated by this deck, but I can point out the inherent flaws in it, right? Not that I think it's not viable, right? It's more so that as I mentioned, I just had a tournament that I showed up to and didn't perform as well,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so this is another deck that I would consider a harder gamble deck, right? Like this deck is one where you have to jump through hoops to win. It still does something very powerful. It still does really cool stuff. It still attacks the meta in a really unique way, right? I'm not worried about this being a viable commander. I'm just worrying about it being consistent enough that if I take it to a 5 round cut to top 16 tournament, I don't know that I can achieve that, especially when I don't have a
Right.
lot of reps on
Well,
target,
and that's
right?
that's what I was about to say is my
Yeah.
thought is, the people who are showing up to a reasonably large event,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That are putting up results with a deck like this
Mhm.
probably have an insane number of reps on this deck
Yeah.
because they have likely been brewing this since the moment this deck was
Probably.
or this card was really
It's
was released.
criminally underplayed right now.
Oh,
Like, I think
100%,
there's,
100%. The
like
card's cracked.
yeah, let me see if I can find it because the EDH top 16 numbers are, like, wildly low, right? Like,
Yeah. I think what it comes down to is it's a $50 card, honestly. I think like
interesting.
a lot of casual play people stay away from it because of that. But
But look at this, 64 plus person tournaments, right? 3 oh, no, this isn't even filtered. This is just 3
yeah.
tournaments. There are 3 people who have brought this to events.
Hmm.
Okay, no, okay. So yeah, if you narrow it down by size, like it's been played a lot in very small tournaments, right? But anything 60 plus,
Three.
three of them, right?
Yeah.
And several of these are pre-ban. Actually,
Right.
all of these are pre-ban too, right? So to me, that indicates that it's still insanely underexplored, right?
Right.
So I really like the archetype. I think it's a really cool design space. A one mana planeswalker is really cool. I like the idea of like, yeah, you get to jump through these hoops, but like at the end of the day, you're still using Simic's very high card quality, right? Like,
Right.
and there's a lot of really cute stuff, and I've loved planeswalkers in general, right? Like that's a big weakness of mine. Um, so for me, I was like, okay, is there any way, and this is where we are getting to something much more quantifiable, right? Is there any way I can take the things that I'm finding stimulating about this deck and make it, the word stimulating is really getting you, isn't it?
I just we got to find a different adjective, right? Like
uh does intellectually
engaging,
stimulating make it better?
interesting.
If I quantify, if I make sure intellectually stimulating, is that easier, or is it just
Yeah,
the word
that
stimulating?
makes it a little bit better. It's
Okay, okay. So the things that I'm finding intellectually stimulating about this deck, it gives me a big old brain boner. Uh, so I'm gonna
we are
take that
children.
idea, right, and I'm gonna move it on to something else, right? And one
Sure.
of the things that I was finding particularly entertaining about this deck, was using Radstorm. And here's the sad part,
Right.
is that this is how I got to where I'm going, and it's probably not staying, which is a little big depression on that one.
One
But the
might call it
idea,
a boner killer.
yeah,
Um,
as one might say. But the idea is like you play a card like Prologue to Phyresis to give your opponents a poison counter,
right.
and then big stack War Ensumes, and you crank out a Radstorm and kill everybody. Is
Right.
kind of the fun part. Plus, with the Planeswalkers in the command zone, there are times when people play a couple spells, you throw off a Radstorm at end step, and you're like, cool, now my Planeswalker, as soon as I untap, is ready to ultimate. Is kind of the idea, right?
Right.
Um, so that's the concept of Radstorm. I think Radstorm goes in Tameo. I don't think Radstorm carries over to where I went next. So
Right.
this is
The story of a girl.
who cried a river and drowned the whole world.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so then I got to this deck that I'm calling Genius or Madness.
Yeah.
And I got to show up to a local event and play this. It was just like friends playing some games, right? So it wasn't super testy, right? But
Right.
it told me enough things about the deck. So this, I mean, Cal, you gave me one of the greatest compliments of all time with this deck.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah. Would you like to repeat it for our audience?
Yeah, in our group chat, I said this is the first Tev Thrasios deck that I've looked at where I go, oh, this is a reason to play Tevesh in the command zone.
Yeah. So my thought was, okay, how do I give myself a little bit more consistency, right? How do I give myself an archetype that I think gives me the same sort of intellectual stimulation as Tameo, right? While also making me feel better about showing up to an event in a different state
Sure.
and saying I'm betting my money on the line, right?
Right.
So I started with Radstorm, like I said, right? So I have the Radstorm, and in this deck, I decided to go with Infectious Bite just because it's a removal spell that also gives the poison.
Yeah, I was about to ask what it was, and then I saw the end
Yeah,
of it, and I was like,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So that's the idea with that. After testing, I looked at Radstorm in hand. I've looked at Infectious Bite in hand in a couple of those games. I played only 4 games with it, but each time they came up, I was like, man, I wish these were fucking anything else, which
Anything
is so
else?
sad to
Yeah.
me because I really was enjoying the concept of doing this. I don't think that this archetype is not worth exploring. I just
Yeah.
think the amount of slots I would have to invest into exploring it right now are not conducive to
Yeah.
consistency, right?
And basically my thought is that like effectively, like I think there is a cEDH infect deck out there effectively, right?
Basically,
That uses this Radstorm thing
yeah.
that does exactly kind of what you're talking about.
Mhm.
And I think that is a dedicated different deck.
Yes, agreed. And that's where I landed with it too.
Yeah.
But my thought was still, like, and here's one of the other things that kind of bummed me out was like I was like, oh well, if I have my planeswalkers on the board, Radstorm just occasionally can just go like, oop, gotcha guys. Like,
Right.
but the thing is, Radstorm has the upside of being an instant,
Hmm.
but the planeswalkers can't activate it at instant speed, right?
Right.
So the only one that can do that was Teferi Master of Time, which I was like, I definitely needed to put that in there, right? Because the idea that I could just go like, cool, Radstorm, take 2 extra turns after this one, it's pretty hot,
It's pretty
right?
good. It's not bad.
Yeah, I do agree. In my testing, Teferi, even independently of that, I'm
Mhm.
very happy with. I think this card is actually really sick.
Yeah, I mean, it is a
Yeah.
good card that I think was correctly played in the like 2020 meta, and then
Mhm.
for some reason we
Fell off.
backed
Yeah.
off of it.
Yeah. Well, because you
Uh,
know what I think it is that people don't realize that it's like Wandering Archaic in that it
yeah,
supports card draw, but it doesn't give you card draw. It only gives you card filtering, right?
right,
So cards like Ledger Shredder, Teferi, and Wandering Archaic, and I say Wandering Archaic because Wandering Archaic's not good if you don't have cards in hand, but Wandering Archaic's great if it's protecting your wins, if it's backing up your wins, et cetera, right?
right,
So it's sort of the same as these looter style effects, right?
sure,
So when those effects happen, if you are drawing cards and then have the ability to filter which one of those cards you are using, it's a lot more effective than just having raw filtering, right? Like
right,
raw filtering is very limited. It's one of the reasons why Rafine hasn't taken off nearly as much as many people would like it to, compared to
right,
other Esper lists that actually put fucking cards in your hand, right?
right, right.
um, so that's sort of the TLDR on Teferi, right? So um, the long and short of it is basically version 2 of this archetype has moved off. But let's explore some other stuff, right? I
Mhm.
did say that Deep Glow State I actually am keeping 100%. This one I'm actually very happy with. I think it performs just how you need it to, right? It just works, right? So specifically, if you flip Tamio, which is in the 99, which is a
Mhm.
very easy card to snick, like
That's not
sneak
hard to
it
flip at
to,
all.
yeah,
That's like one
yeah,
one turn with the Mystic
yeah.
Remora out, right?
Right, and, like, to be honest, in a Thrasios deck, I was finding a lot of times where I was like, "Oh, cool, instead of paying 4 for a Thrasios activation, I'm just cracking 2 clues because 'cause I've had Tamio out
On
a
it,
couple times too."
honestly, what it kind of makes me think of is we were talking about this a little bit when
Yeah,
were working on Hashaton a little bit,
yeah,
in how like Ocelot Pride kind of plays a specific role in the
yeah,
deck. And it reminds me a lot of the slot that
yeah,
plays, that like Ragavan also
yeah,
plays in a lot of other decks, where it's that one drop that kind of
mhm.
glues a couple things together.
Yeah, yeah. And I also wanna shout out, while I, kinda, like, dive into this, archetype, I had a client I worked with named, I think he goes by Viraj on online, but,
Hmm.
uh he had mentioned that he's been playing Tevesh in a way that I've really glued to this mentality on.
Hmm.
And it's basically like uptick typal Tevesh, right? Where
Hmm.
instead of using the sacrifice ability, you are just making bodies with Tevesh and then focusing on a very enduring vitality, cradle heavy version of this deck, right? And
Hmm.
I sort of gelled with that idea really, really quickly. And I was like, oh, that feels really awesome to have that sort of big mana
Hmm.
potential. We'll get back to like the Planeswalker counter stuff, right? But this is something that even if I wasn't doing some of the more cute stuff in this deck with the Planeswalkers, I think uptick Tevesh style Thrasios decks are actually really, really strong
For
because
sure.
what I'm finding and what I was finding when I tested this deck out was that it was very easy for me to by the time I get to turn 3, turn 4, untap with like 12, 15 mana. Like
Hmm.
it's just very easy to like get to that critical mass
Right.
through basically like hyper focusing on Gaia's Cradle, et cetera, right? So in this version, you have the Black Tutors, you have Sowing Myco Spawn, which I found to be very consistent. Like I'm
Hmm.
often turn 2, turn 3, Sowing Myco Spawn after playing a couple bodies. Super easy to get
The
to.
fact that it just tutors without needing to be kicked is fucking
Yeah.
stupid. Every time I read that card, I'm like, yeah, but it's like 6 mana. I'm like, wait, no, you don't have to kick it to get the effect. What the fuck?
No, and in fact, I often, do not give a flying fuck about the kicker.
Yeah,
It's just an on curve 4 mana cradle, right? Like, and a body for the respective cradle, right?
yeah,
Like, there are many times where at minimum, it's just like, cool, play Sowing Myco Spawn gets me a cradle. Now I can tap for Thrasios activation. What else can you really want?
absolute cinema.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Field goal for sure, right? Like, so been enjoying that quite a lot. I'm testing out Candelabra of Tanos because I'm so cradle focused in the
Yeah, it
list.
seems fine.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting. I'm excited to test that out, and it's really cool because it synergizes with Displacer Kitten obviously very well.
Sure. Right.
Because you get to just as soon as you have Cradle, Kitten, and Candelabra, like every single spell is netting you dozens of mana, right? Like it's kind of ridiculous at that point. Um, and obviously Displacer Kitten has a huge amount of synergy with Tevesh, right? So that's a whole game plan on top of on top of all that. So definitely, as I mentioned, very Cradle heavy, Enduring Vitality. It's to the point where I'm considering Cryptolith Right. I just need to find a spot for it as
Glasses
well.
of
Just to
Urza,
have,
baby. Glasses
huh?
of Urza.
Listen, I'm trying the Glasses of Urza.
You
I'm
can
not
try
gonna,
it. That's fine.
yeah.
But if you're looking for a slot, that's a slot. Like,
No, no, and I understand that, right? Like this is I'm truly putting this in the deck to experiment to see if this is real.
yeah.
Um, I am ambitious about it. I did not see it in any of my testing games. Or I should say ambitiously optimistic. But we'll see. We'll see. It's you
You
know,
know
it's
what
gonna be
you
interesting.
should be running in this deck in your mana base?
Hit me.
Fucking Urza Saga.
Should I?
I mean, if you're a Candelabra deck, absolutely.
Yeah. I don't
Like,
like Urza Saga, to be honest.
I know you don't like Urza Saga, but it gets 1, 2, 3, 4 of your, like, 3 of your best cards in your deck and one card that you have said could potentially be like very good, right? Like, I
Mm,
think Urza Saga is certainly worthy of a slot here.
I just wouldn't be happy about giving up a land for any of these, if I'm being realistic here. Yeah. And also playing another colorless land on top of all the lands I already have in the deck.
Well,
Yeah,
I would, if it was me, probably, like, I wouldn't look at it as a land.
sure.
I would look at it as a tutor with upside. Specific that you can tutor up with stuff like crop rotation and other stuff like that. That gives you some like additional value that isn't just, and it doesn't cost you anything, right? Like it's just a free thing that you can do. If you continue to do like these proliferate things, it ramps up the speed with which you are
Well,
able
yeah,
to
that's
get
the other part
that.
of it is that yes, and that part's kind of interesting. But I'm
Yeah,
also actively looking at cutting Radstorm, right? So like
sure.
it,
Well, sure.
yeah,
But I still think that like Urza Saga, like especially
yeah,
if like Candelabra is in your deck, it's hard for me to see a reason not to play Saga. Like if you're gonna cut Radstorm, I feel like that's a great swap for Saga because you're not really cutting into your mana base for that.
I
You're
guess, yeah.
you're
I
just
don't know.
adding a piece. You know what I mean?
I don't think that I would. So what you're basically proposing is that Urza Saga fits in a spell slot, and I like it even less fitting in a spell slot.
Yeah, I mean, different strokes for different folks. I think
Yeah,
Saga is really hard to not play here, but
yeah. I think I'm gonna agree to disagree on that one. Um,
I am a Saga lover, so
yes, yes. Yeah, I don't think like even Candelabra needs Cradle to like be great, right? And so like the critical mass of things that you need is too
sure,
high in my opinion.
sure.
Um, if we were on like Expo map, maybe I would consider it, right? Expedition
Mhm,
map
mhm,
to grab Cradle. I think that's a little bit different, but we're not, right? So
mhm.
that's at least worth considering as a package, I
I mean,
think.
yeah, I don't even think that's even a bad package to
No,
have.
it's not. It's not,
Yeah,
to be
I
clear.
think
Like,
that's a
yeah. I
fantastic
just
package.
think crop rotation and summon mega spawn are better, and that's the reason why that
Sure.
not in there, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
if I was looking for a third version of that effect, I think Expedition Map is 100%
Yes.
that thing, right? Because of its tutor ability, right?
Um,
Okay.
the other thing that I like about this build
Yeah.
is I think that is doing this might be what you think is the spicy card. I think it is the objectively correct card to be playing in a Tevesh deck, and that's Kasmina. Like
Yeah.
I
Let's talk
think
about that. Yeah.
if you are playing Tevesh, it is very hard for this is part of why when you sent this to me, I was like, hey, look, a reason to play
Yeah.
Tevesh. When you are playing Tevesh, this is one of the cards that I am immediately, especially Tefthras, where I'm
Yeah.
immediately just like, this is a reason to play this,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yep.
this sells me on wanting to play this
Yeah.
because it's not just a expensive value engine. It
Mhm.
does stuff with the deck. You know what I
Agreed.
mean? It's
Agreed.
not just a gimmick.
Yeah.
And instead it's like an actual thing that the deck
Yep.
is trying to do.
Yeah, so like the bodies with Cradle, I think are huge, right?
Yes.
And I think specifically because we are trying to +2 to Vesh more often, it makes the Kasmina plan even more realistic with this
Correct.
deck, right?
Yeah.
So basically, TLDR for those who aren't out there knowing what the fuck we're talking about. Um, Kasmina gives other planeswalkers her ability, right? So
Mhm.
+2 to scry 1, you can make a fractal, or specifically her ultimate, which is -8. Search your library for an instant or sorcery card that shares a color with this planeswalker. Exile that card, shuffle, you can cast it for free, right? So specifically, as long as Tevesh is at 8 loyalty, right? So only 2 upticks, which is not
Mhm.
crazy to get to, right? And especially once again, we're able to, without using like dark rituals and cabal rituals and stuff like that, we're still able to pretty consistently turn 3 Tevesh with this deck very, very often. Like it is nauseatingly consistent how often turn 3 Tevesh specifically
Right.
comes out, and not even to mention the sides of like turn 1, turn 2 Tevesh, right? Like it happens. Um, but the turn 3 Tevesh pretty realistic. So like by turn 5, which once again, we're not asking a lot for our turn 5. This is a turn
No.
5 where we can be holding up mana, holding up interaction, right? It's not
Right.
like we're tapping out every turn, ignoring the table, right? But by the time Tevesh hits that 8 loyalty, you can play Kasmina. So basically, just for a 3 mana investment, you get a free Peer into the Abyss, right?
Mhm.
Because you -8 Tevesh, and this is why you play Peer into this deck, right?
Right.
And what's nice about this is that Peer justifies Calling Ritual, which is already a card we sort of
You
want in this
kinda wanna
deck.
be playing
It's a
anyway.
little it's a little weird in a Tevesh. Like this is definitely a very Thrasios heavy deck, right? So
Sure.
playing Calling Ritual in those types of decks is weird, but you need some sort of big payoff to justify why am I getting rid of all my thralls if I'm so
Right.
heavy on Cradle? Why am I getting rid of all these things, right? And the TLDR goes down to yeah, because I'm about to make like 20 to 30 mana and then just jam up here into the abyss, right?
Right.
I had a game literally yesterday where I was trying to do the creature combo thing with like some of the pods that were there, and like I basically because there was a Kinnan deck like running away, it was very clear that there was a bunch of creature removal at the table, and everyone was like sort of waiting for the Kinnan to go off, and I was like, I think they've all got a bunch of creature removal and no stack interaction, and I was like, I'm
Mhm.
just gonna DT Dark Ritual play Peer, and they were like, fuck, and so like having this mid range deck that has that pivot to just go boom, here's the
Yeah.
Adnauseam thing without having to completely dilute my whole curve and all of that kind
Right.
of stuff, right? Because you couldn't play most of the cards in this deck if you were on Adnauseam,
Oh,
right?
no.
Realistically.
That's one of the things that I like about it is it gives you, like it lets you play your mid-range creature deck without needing to be like,
Yeah.
can I afford to play this?
Yeah.
I need my CMC to be 1.9, not 2.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like
No, I
it's
completely hear you. Yep.
I like this significantly more as a deck than I do like 99% of the Tevesh Thras decks that I see out there, because it's just like it has a reason to do what it's doing.
Hmm.
It's not just we're playing Tevesh because it's Tevesh, baby. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it justifies its existence in my mind.
Yeah, yeah, and I
Um,
do genuinely think like Tevesh is probably underexplored, especially with Cradle as a backup
no,
for
100%.
it. Yeah,
I think the way people, because in the past I've said, like, I don't think Tevesh is very good.
yeah,
When I'm saying that, I'm saying, like, I don't think Tevesh is very good the
as
way
it's
people
being
are
played.
using them,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
Tevesh Krom's a great example of that, right?
yeah,
Where they're using him as this like value card draw engine. And I'm like,
sure.
I just don't think he's very good. Like 5 mana for 2 turns worth of value is a
Yeah,
steep price, right?
yeah. No,
Like
fair.
it that is my biggest qualm with it. And
Mhm.
you know, these sorts of builds intrigue me significantly more
Yeah,
than some of the other stuff I've seen from it. But
super fair, super
um,
fair.
and I like that you get access to like Hazels in your
Yeah,
99. I like
yeah,
that you get access to Kinnan in your 99.
yeah. Kin has
Um,
been awesome in this deck. I mean,
oh, for sure. Like
it
Kinnan
like
seems like a slam dunk here.
yeah, yeah. It feels so good, especially because like you're already big mana focused, right? So it just sort of synergizes with the rest of the deck. Let's dive for a second into the deep glow state stuff, right? Because the
Sure.
math on it's actually really interesting, right?
I know you and
So
Jeremy have been talking about this a lot.
yeah. So with Tevesh, right? As long as you've upticked a single time, right? So as long
Mhm.
as Tevesh is at 5 or 6, right? Basically, you resolve a deep glow skate, you double its counters, ultimates right away, right? Everybody's planeswalkers and everybody's commanders. I mean, and by that I mean just everyone's commanders. They're on your battlefield. You control them. GG's, right? Um, so everyone's commanders are yours, right? For the rest of the game until whatever happens, right? Um, if Kasmina's out and it's upticked, you can ultimate her right away. Now, Kasmina can't go grab Pier, right? And so that's part's a little awkward, but
Right.
Kasmina can grab things like Mnemonic Betrayal and a number of other things in the deck. That's not the main plan with Kasmina. Obviously, we've already sort of covered the main plan with Kasmina.
Right.
But it doesn't hurt. If the One Ring is out, you can suddenly go, oh, I've got 2 counters in my One Ring. Now I have 4 counters in my One Ring. Go into my next turn, crunch, draw 5, make something happen, right?
Right.
That part's pretty nice. If Tamio's out and she's upticked a single time and survived a turn rotation, you get to go, cool. Deep Glow State, she's at 8, -7, draw half my deck. Second copy of Peer into the Abyss, let's go.
Absolute cinema.
Pretty fucking good, right? Like, pretty fucking good. If Teferi's out, you need to have him at 5, which, if you haven't played against Teferi, it's not that hard.
It's not hard.
Because if it's uninterrupted for an entire turn rotation, it's already at 7 loyalty by the time it gets back to your turn.
Right.
Pretty easy to do. So you just go, cool. Deep Glow State,
Pretty
2 turns. Yeah.
good.
Yeah. So Deep Glow, doesn't work with every card in the deck, but it's the thing that's allowing me to go, what is this deck doing that's kind of unique?
Sure.
And honestly, if anybody sees this coming, I'll give them $100. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think that this
You earned it, right? Like,
yeah. For sure. So like that's sort of the central thesis of this deck, right? Is that like we're keeping the card quality pretty high. It's Sultai Thrasios, right? It's a super turbo Cradle deck, right? Which is
Right.
really fun. It's a play pattern I've enjoyed for a long time. Very Seedborn Muse heavy, all that kind of stuff. But it's also got a couple of these like I win buttons that people are not ready for. And also like Deep Glow State on the stack is a creature, right? And your planeswalkers on the field really need like non-land bounce to be disrupted, and a lot of them can't even be abrupt decayed, right? So, or at least like half of them can't even be abrupt
Right.
decayed, right? So like there's very few pieces that sort of fuck with that pattern when it's about to happen, right? And Tevesh stealing everyone's commanders isn't like a I immediately win the game button, but it certainly doesn't hurt, right? Like it
Right.
certainly really puts things in your favor. Now, it will make you the arch enemy right away, obviously, but at that point, I would hope you can turn the corner somewhat expediently. You know what I mean?
Oh my god. You know what's hilarious?
Tell me, hit me.
This might be too much of a meme, but
Mm,
you
very
could
excited.
play Vraska's Betrayal Sting in this.
The one that
completed
updated for
one.
proliferate, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a whole considering board of planeswalkers, right?
Yeah, I saw them. I'm looking through some of like my
Yeah.
list of planeswalkers I have just
Yeah.
is like interesting things.
Here, let's
And
pull
the
it up.
reason I bring this one up is if target player has it's ultimate, right, which is a -9, it starts at 6.
Yeah.
So the scenario you're describing
Mm-hmm.
doesn't even need to uptick.
Yeah.
If target player has fewer than 9 poison counters, they get a number of poison counters equal to the difference.
Yep.
Quite good.
So here's my qualm with it, right?
Yes.
Every planeswalker I want to have in this deck, I
Mhm.
want to be good independently of the Deep
Yes.
Glow Skate synergy.
Super
right?
fair.
Here's my 2 parts to my qualms with this card, right? Number 1, it puts them at 9, and then
Mhm.
you still need another proliferate, which means Vraska has to be able to ultimate, survive a turn rotation, and then activate the 0 again.
Right.
If this was a version, and I think there's a version out there of this deck, as you mentioned,
Mhm.
that goes harder into the synergies, right? So, for
Yeah.
example, if like 4 mana Atraxa is in the command zone, or even if it's just like a version of this deck that has Dreamtide Whale and has the Prologue to Phyresis and the
Right.
Radstorm and like all of that, then this is perfect in that deck.
Right.
Unfortunately, because it needs to survive an entire turn rotation and we don't have any other passive proliferate,
Right.
it's really hard for me to justify that.
Oh
inclusion.
yeah.
Plus,
No, I'm just like looking at shit, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, this is interesting as far as like it kind of falls in line with some of the stuff you've talked about already.
Yes.
Um,
It's like it really does feel like it is so 80% there, and it's so
Yeah.
frustrating. And that's what I felt about basically every other planeswalker I've wanted to put in this deck. The
Yeah.
closest one for me is Kiora right now.
yeah. No,
Um,
that card fucking slaps.
Because specifically, like if we're a turbo cradle deck, like untap a creature in a land on the uptick. That's literally what we're trying to do, right?
Yeah.
Like to me, that's awesome. My biggest qualm with Kiora, realistically, is that the emblem is cool, but it's not busted.
Yeah, I think the
You know?
ultimate is like super fair.
Mhm.
The
For
-2 I think is actually super underrated for
I
how
think
good
the -2 is
-2
also very powerful. Yeah. So reveal the top 4. You can put a creature and or a land from among them into your hand, right? So if you hit a creature or land, boom, those are both in your hand. Immediate
Right.
card advantage. I can't stress enough how much I think the uptick is actually so real. Like I
Yeah.
can see so many play patterns, and just thinking about games I've already played on this deck, where I'm able to basically play Kira for free, like the Sowing Myco spawn, right? Where it's just like, cool, tap a Cradle and another dude to like play Kira and go, cool, uptick. Now they're untapped. It was free. And then for the rest of time, it's just, okay, cool. That's a Thrasios activation every turn at minimum, right?
Yeah.
Um,
No, I like this a
yeah,
lot. I think that this definitely is worthy of a spot.
yeah.
The other card that
Okay, I just wanted to read the ultimate for
oh yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
podcast audience specifically. I'm thinking about you. See, I've changed.
God, it is about time
Yeah,
you
yeah,
come
yeah.
around to listen to the people who pay the bills.
I know, I know. So it's negate says you get an emblem with, and it starts at 4, right? So if you just play it and then deep glow state, you do the thing right away, which is pretty cool. You get an emblem with whenever a creature you control enters, you may have it fight its creature, and then you make 3 8/8s, which is just like, okay, it's 3 removal spells stapled into one. Oh, actually, you know what card I want to bring up is actually before we go on your separate tangent thing. One card that I do think ultimate actually just wins 90% of the
Oh,
time is Jade's
100%.
Architect of Thought.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Right. It's -8 is for each player. Search that player's library
This
for
was
a
the card I
non-land.
was going to bring up.
Oh, fuck yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
cool, cool,
Like
cool.
you were right in line with where my brain was going.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Yeah, so it's -8 is search those basically for each opponent. Oh, for each player. Oh my
Mhm.
god, does mine too? I can
Yeah.
get my PETA and protect it?
Uh-huh.
I thought it was good. It's great. That's insane. Holy. And you know, oops. Uh, the crazy part is, I, as we keep doing this shit,
Yeah.
as we keep finding ultimates that I keep wanting to go like, fuck, that's awesome. A part of me really like, it's really hard for me not to just want to put a doubling season into this deck and like just have a couple I win buttons.
I think that's not unreal. Okay, so this
Especially
is
like at minimum, Tevesh comes in with double loyalty and makes 4 bodies.
right.
That's bleh.
I so okay.
Pop off.
I think you are being really safe by only playing 2.5 planeswalkers in this deck. Tamio is a half a planeswalker.
Valid.
I think you could build like go up to 4 or 5 pretty
Yeah.
comfortably and all of it work really well.
Yeah, and that's
I
where it
think
gets to the interesting
I don't
part.
think it's ready for Saturday build.
Yeah, that's the problem. Yes, I agree.
I'm just like more looking at this
'Cause I
because
do
this
think
is the thing. This is like
Yeah.
again, I said this over and over again. This is like a build of the deck that captures my imagination
Yeah.
that I can't say others have.
Sure,
And
sure.
I think that, if you're going to include something like Deep Glow Skate, right? It makes me go, okay, then why don't we lean harder into those synergies instead of hedging into like safer options? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? That's my I that being said, I am all about hedging into safe options. That's like something I'm all about.
Yeah.
But like with that being, I do think that when you have a commander like this,
Yep.
you can justify it a little bit more than when you have like playing into the synergies. I think is never inherently bad.
Right.
And I think there's like obviously a fine line
Yeah.
of how hard you do that. But my thought with like playing into the synergies is it's always you go way too hard first and then pull it back because it's easier to find that balance.
I agree.
After you've gone too hard.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree. And as anyone who's watching the visual version of this could see, I made sort of a copy of the deck and like put in some of the cards that we're talking about for what that version would look like. I do think if you go into that harder version, Ichor Moon Gauntlet becomes a slam dunk in that version.
Ichor Moon Goblet and Vaska become playable immediately.
Yeah, Vraska does become way more playable in that version too, right? I
Like,
think
if
that's
you're
also the version
playing
where you
more
probably play
than
Dreamtide Whale too.
yeah, I think if you're playing more than like 4 or more planeswalkers, Vraska
Yeah,
justifies herself.
yeah. I think Hero does too. I think Vraska's close, right? Like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think you have to have a certain number of planeswalkers for her to justify
I
herself.
completely agree with that. Yeah.
I don't know what that number is. My gut says it's 4, but
Yeah.
I could just be.
Yeah, in that version, I think like plays Architect of Thought. I think
Yep.
that version. I think you have to play Tiny Jace in that version because it's one of the most efficient ways to get a Planeswalker, even though the ultimate's mid as fuck. I think.
I
Yeah,
mean, you don't play Jace. You don't play JVP because of the ultimate. You play
yeah,
it because it's card selection
and it's 2
and
mana. Yeah,
it like is a little bit of a snapcaster,
yeah.
right? Like it has that ability to it.
Completely agree. And that's so that would be my idea for like, if we steered harder into the skid, right? Like if we went deeper into that version of the list, these are a bunch of the cards that I think like show up a little bit more,
Yeah,
right?
100%.
So
I also think that Teferi Mage of Zalfir is maybe worse in this build.
in that build, yeah, of course. And this is why it's at 106 right now. This is more of I'm putting cards in, and this is all the paint I would throw at the wall and then
Right.
pull some stuff back out
Yep,
later. You know what
100%.
I mean? Yeah. So we'll go back to so this is so yeah, that's definitely as we talked about, like that's the hardest paint you get to throw at the wall for that version, right? And in the doubling season stuff and like all of that things, they feel so 90% there, right? Like it's so almost there. So now moving back, right, to this weekend, right? Where I'm feeling a little depressed about Radstorm and I'm feeling a little depressed about Infectious Bite because, first of all, I mean, Infectious Bite in particular, like if we look at the creatures in my deck, they're not big.
beefy.
They're not big boys. And like there's many times when I've just got a bunch of dorks in the Thrasios out, and like that is not exactly punching through a lot of things, right? So the Infectious Bite having extra utility is sort of like
Not really having utility.
Yeah, it's like I can kill a Kinnan every once in a while.
Right.
So I made some changes. Here's the version I'm currently working on.
Send me this list too so that I can look at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
On my other page.
And this is what I would be looking to play this very weekend. And by the time that you are listening to this, I'm referring to the weekend that has just happened, Snowy Summit 5K, which you can see how well or bad I've done. So the big changes are we can actually go down here to the change log, which is basically
now that's spicy.
What one?
I just do your thing. I'm just reacting as I'm looking at this.
Yeah.
And going through.
So I like put Toxtril in, took Toxtril out. I was like, I don't know. Toxtril's close though, right? But Radstorm, Infectious Bite, Malevolent Hermit, I've also taken out and put back in because one of my ads was Diabolic Intent.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, Malevolent Hermit's a really good thing to sack to Diabolic Intent specifically. Plus, we have all these bodies from Tevesh. Diabolic Intent, I'm still fluctuating on here and there, right? Like it's very much a non-Thrasios card. It's very much a much more proactive card. I do feel like I want an extra tutor. I've also found that like Diabolic Intent might just replace Mystical Tutor because, to be honest, I'm not feeling great about Mystical Tutor right now.
Yeah, this is interesting because Mystical Tutor here feels underwhelming. What was the deck we were looking at the other day where I was just like, I think, it was never mind. We were playing a wild ass build the other day where I was just like, I think you need Mystical Tutor, bud.
Yep.
So yeah, like, I think, but here's my thing is I feel like here Diabolic Intent. I don't think Diabolic Intent is going to be available when you want it to be, right? In terms of like you want to be sacking ideally a thrall.
Yeah.
And I think it generally will be relevant pre-Tevesh than post-Tevesh generally.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's where my brain thinks that like maybe Wishclaw is a better option there. But
okay, that's interesting because
that's usually what I swap, right?
Yeah.
If I'm playing a deck that doesn't want to sack creatures, I'd
You
play
put Wishclaw
Wishclaw over
in.
Diabolic
No,
Intent.
that's really interesting, actually. I hadn't thought about it like that as sort of a one-for-one paradigm. And it does solve the problem of, like, one of my favorite synergies in cEDH is Wishclaw into Culling Ritual. I think it's
Mhm.
the funniest fucking thing in the entire world. Um, and it's such a good combo. So if I have, like, Meme Bet or Peer in the hand, or if I have the opposite situation where I have Culling Writ in hand and I want
Yeah.
to get one of these two as payoffs, that combo is
Right,
pretty
right.
fucking good,
Yeah.
right? Um, so I can actually really get behind that. Thanks, Cal. That helps a
You're
ton. This is
welcome.
why I was hoping we would do this today.
You're
This is
welcome.
sick as fuck.
That's that is always the way I look at it, is they
Yeah.
are effectively the same card, just playing on
Yeah.
slightly different axes.
And you know what the funny part is? I'm not used to not playing Wishclaw. So it's so much so that I've just kind of forgot I wasn't even on it at this
Mhm. Yeah.
point. But it's also one of those things where I'm like, I'm not trying to force a Mox Opal package on 13 artifacts, you know what I mean? Which is why I'm like, that's why I wasn't thinking about Wishclaw as hard as I normally do. But
Right.
Diabolic Intent versus Wishclaw does make sense. You know, a Wishclaw obviously has the downside of like starting the Wishclaw game,
Mhm.
but we've just mentioned we have at least two pieces of like Oppo plus Culling Ritual to
Yeah, and I
negate
mean,
the
in
Wishclaw.
Wishclaw is always, and Diabolic Intent is very similar in this
Yeah.
respect too, because they both have these like conditional pieces to them.
Sure, sure. Yeah.
And I think that makes them extremely situational pieces.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because of that, like there are people that I see just like throw out wish claws, right? Like
Oh, it's
willy-nilly.
psychotic. Yeah.
And I'm like, guys, just you can sit on that card. You don't have to cast it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can just hang on to it. It
Yeah.
is okay. Um, and that's kind of how I always feel about it, is it's just like I would just sit on it until you need it.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
when you need it, you go for it. But
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
the card that I was going, oh, thou that's spicy, is fucking Growing Rites of Itlamok. Fucking get out of town. That's hot.
Okay. I'm glad you enjoy it.
I
So
am not sure if it's good enough.
yeah, I think it is probably of any deck I've played in recent history. It is comedically easy to get to 4 bodies in this deck.
I absolutely believe that
Like,
this
it
in this
is
deck it is.
moronically easy. If you think about the fact that your commander and a mana dork and Tevesh's uptick a single time turns that on,
Mhm.
it is fucking crazy. And if you already have Thrasios set up, the fact that you get to go, cool, invest in growing rights, potentially cantrip. To be
Mhm.
honest, in this deck, I don't give a fuck if I cantrip, right? Like, I'm playing Sowing Mycospawn as a 3/3 that sometimes gets a cradle, and that's great. Like, I'll take the fucking body, I
Mhm.
get, but it's a
Excuse
3/3.
you, it can also get Talon Gates. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
come on.
And E-Zone, actually, for real, for real. But, like, my point is, like, I'm willing to pay 4 for a cradle. So
Right.
why would I not be willing to pay 3 for a cradle? And you might go like, "Oh, but you can't use it on main phase." I don't care. I'm a fucking Thrasios deck. Like, oh no, it flips on end step, and I guess I'll have a Thrasios activation or two. Oh man, really?
Yeah, of like all
That's
the
pretty
decks
much
that could play this
yeah,
card, this is maybe the closest I've seen. I still think it's real fucking close.
yeah.
It's like
That's super fair. I don't
it's
have any criticisms of that. Yeah,
that is my only thing about it, but also just the fact that like it is. I mean, it's not that. You know what? It is. I just sold myself on the card. It
hell yeah.
is elves of what's the 3 mana Gaia's Cradle.
Oh, Circle of Dreams Druid. Yeah,
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 it's
yeah.
just Circle of Dreams Druid with upside.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah,
And
like
not having 1 toughness, which is pretty fucking real, huh?
yeah, like
Yeah.
that. Like I literally was just like, yeah, you could play that, and it comes down, and I was like, wait, this is just that with upside.
Yeah,
Like,
also, like, it has, board wipe protection too, right? Like, it does just give you green, right? Which is really nice.
like the backside is a strictly better Gaia's Cradle.
Yeah.
So
Pretty good. Uh, yeah, and honestly with, let's see, we got how many creatures? 22. So, let's see if I can find a MTG hypergeometric.
hmm?
I'm the hypergeometric calculator. So, okay, so population size we have hypothetically, I mean, it'll be even less, right? But like, so there's 98 cards in the deck.
Yeah.
And there's 22 creatures with the
No, number of cards we were drawing in
sample size
opening
is 4.
hand.
Yeah. I got them mixed up. This is 22.
Okay.
There you go. Yeah, I just need to get 1. Calculate. Yeah, so like 65% chance of hitting.
It's pretty good. I would cast that spell in D&D. in Baldur's Gate.
Yeah. Like the thing is, and this is why, like 65% is not amazing. It's like a little less than 2/3, right? Which is still pretty decent.
Mhm.
But I'm okay with it missing, right? That's why
Yeah.
I think Ilamok's fine, right? Like
Yeah.
basically the whole conversation we just had is like I'm totally fine with it whiffing. This is probably the most likely to be cut, Love Hermit.
Yeah. No,
I
that
do
makes sense.
think like the fact that it synergizes with Tevesh.
Did you mean to
It
stop sharing your screen?
Nope.
Damn it. What are you doing? What are you doing, guy?
So the fact that I can sack it to Tevesh,
Yeah.
I was originally thinking I could sack it to Diabolic Intent. That's obviously changed.
Yep.
I'm not playing Neoform. I'm not playing Eldritch Evolution. I don't want to sack my bodies for tutors and get
Mhm,
blown out.
mhm.
Like that's just not the type of game plan I'm trying to play with this deck. Um,
I
and
don't like Hermit here, to be honest.
yeah, I like it less now that I cut Diabolic Intent because
Yeah.
I cut it, then said I'm playing Diabolic Intent. Oh wait, maybe I should put Hermit back.
Yeah.
The other potential argument for playing Malevolent Hermit is in case I want to move to the Flare of Denial version of this deck, but I don't think I do yet. There
I don't
was a
like that. I don't
version
like that.
earlier. Well, there was a version earlier where I was looking at Kitsa and I was looking at Malevolent
Sure.
Hermit and
Sure.
JVP. And like at that point, I was like, there's a lot of expendable bodies, right? And
Sure.
also, this is one of those Thrasios decks where you can sacrifice Thrasios, and the only combo that cares about it is Kin and Basalt, right?
Right.
Which is not super bad. Also, Kin and Basalt, I know people are like high and low on whether you even throw the Basalt in. It felt so fucking free in this deck to just slap that in there, right? Like Kinnon's
You're a
obviously about
Thrasios deck. Why wouldn't you? What the
right.
fuck?
Well, I think a lot of people take issue with the Basalt part, but I think that's more in the Timna Thras, which is like I think genuinely one of the reasons to go down a color and lose white. White's good, don't get me wrong. But white
Mhm.
takes a lot of investment in a lot of these
It
decks, right?
absolutely
Like you
does.
have to pay double white pips a lot of the time. So if you want a cleaner mana base, and if you want things like Gaia's Cradle to pay off more often, that is one of the main reasons to go down colors. Apart from all the synergies and stuff like that that we've been talking about throughout this entire episode so
Right.
far, too, right? So yeah, I mean, if I have to come up with a chopping block right now, like Malevolent Hermit's close, right?
Mhm.
Mystical Tutor's close.
Mhm.
Which makes me more skeptical of Spellseeker, which is crazy because I was actually pretty okay with Spellseeker originally.
Mhm.
And in playing, I will still
My
say like Spellseeker is still fine. You know what
my
I mean? Like,
question with Spellseeker is like, what are
yeah,
you getting with Spellseeker?
that's super good question, right? Like, yesterday I played a game where it was just like, cool, I went and grabbed a top deck tutor because I was able to loot and then
Sure.
play Brewmaster and win the game, right? I can get Psych Rift with it. I can get Demonic Tutor with
Mhm.
it. I can get it's the fact that it converts body to instant sorcery that I do
Sure.
like about it, right?
Mhm.
Not to mention like, not that this is a huge part of it, but like you basically win the game if you ever get Spellseeker plus Kitten. Because you just basically go like, cool, Spellseeker, grab Dark Ritual, cast Dark Ritual, flicker Spellseeker, go grab Demonic Tutor, grab some sort of non-creature spell, and push a win, right? Like it's very easy to convert
Yeah.
that to I win the game, right? Not as easy as it would be in like a Grixis style deck, but still, pretty fucking easy. If I'm being
No,
honest.
I think that's
Yeah.
valid.
Um, so that's definitely an idea with it, right? So it's felt decent to just have a Cradle body that gives
Mhm.
us a spell, right?
Yeah.
It's also one of the more fair cards in the deck, right? Like if I
Sure.
swap that out with another creature, I would be happy with it.
Mhm.
I'm very happy with playing Notion Thief. I think people are so afraid of OBM right now that they're not playing Notion Thief. But if everybody's complaining about the fucking Ristic studies, like here's a solution. I get to grind through them and you don't. And GG's, right? Like is kind of my idea
Do
there.
you want to know a really depressing fact about this deck?
Huh.
This might be a Shieldred deck.
I don't think so.
I
But
think
tell me
it's
your thoughts. I'm curious.
my thoughts with it is, first of all, Ristics are fucking everywhere still. So that is an extremely strong part of Shieldred, is it punishes those really hard. And if we're saying that we can get, a Tevesh out quickly, we can certainly get a Shieldred out quickly.
Quicker, sure.
Yeah.
I think like a potential, not to fully stop you, but a potential counter argument to that is like double black is very real, right? Comparatively to a single black pip and Tevesh, like that does
I
become
would still argue this is the same thing that we said about like Archdruid's Charm before, where we were like, oh man, it's gonna be hard to make like 3 green. I'm just like, babe,
can
you're in a
have it
green
break
deck. It's
3
so
green.
easy to make mana. Like,
I would rather play Archdruid Charm because you can tap 3 green
you don't.
moronically easy in this deck, right? Like
Sure,
that's the
but
point.
I'm not saying you play one or the other. I think you can play both. I think you have slots for both of them. But
Sure.
anyway, the reasoning for it is, you are doing that. You have Teferi, which is looting. That is going to be drawing new cards. You're doing the Thrasios stuff. That's going to be drawing new cards because that does draw a card, which is going to give you some benefit there.
I don't give a shit though, right? About 2 life, like
It is a grindy card. The point of the card is
yeah.
that it is a grindy card. It is for when games get grindy. It helps you go long if you need to, and it puts pressure on your opponents because the longer the game goes, the better it gets for you. Because of the fact that it puts pressure on your opponents. It gives your opponents a lot of reason to be like, oh man, you know what I mean? And most people are going to ignore it for a while because of the fact they're like, oh, it's just 2 mana, because they have your mentality. But I've won so many games off the back of that mentality because people completely ignore it. And then they're like, oh shit, I'm at 8 life.
But that's
Granted,
not how
that's
I ever play it in game, right? Like when I'm like the problem with Shieldred is that I don't fear Shieldred. I'm too respectful of Shieldred, right? Like
Mhm,
this is my main criticism of Shieldred as someone who's played against it many times, right?
mhm,
Because what it ends up doing is annoying everybody into someone else winning the game because people over respect the Shieldred, and then it doesn't actually prevent anybody from drawing. So either the person who drew a bunch of cards and then got an answer, and yeah, they're at 12, but they still win the fucking game,
mhm.
or it's the person who goes, "Oh, well, I have to overcommit to answer the Shieldred because I'm dead to damage in a way that is very obvious and everyone can see it. So let me overcommit to deal with this resource." And then the person goes, "Cool, next turn, untap, combo win," completely unrelated to
Sure.
the Shieldred, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the play patterns I see with the card more often, which is why I'm so critical of it,
Yeah. I
right?
have not had those experiences
Yeah,
with it.
yeah,
That is also because I tend to play decks that are more control-y,
sure,
and handles those situations well. And the reason I mention that in this deck is because this is a deck that feels like it can handle those situations reasonably well. Compared to like a Timnath Crom or a Timnath Thrasios that kind of has its hands in a lot of different baskets. This is a deck that and it might not be the deck for it. I'm just kind of throwing it out there, is
yeah.
that with card draw being so big and you having a lot of passive card draw,
Yep.
if you want to punish card draw, Shieldred is a reasonable card to play.
I think you may see this card as a good card for this type of deck. I think I would rather see it in a Timnacrom deck because
Mhm.
you have all of the black rituals to pay off for an early Shieldred. I legitimately
And
think
you have all
that
the black rituals here too, though. Like,
I
you
only
just
have
don't have
Dark Red
culling. Oh, you
and
just have
Tron.
Dark Ret. I mean, I
Yeah.
just had Dark Ret and Tivit. It's fine.
Right, and that's why I think Tivit's a better deck for it, because I think you can play Shieldred as a protect the queen, right? Like you can have the
Yeah, that's
interactions,
fair.
not commit to the board anymore, all that kind of stuff. You can play even board wipes around
That's
Shieldred,
fair.
right?
Yeah.
But with this deck, I don't ever want to protect Shieldred. Like that's not the queen I'm trying to protect. I'm trying to go into the Thrasios game plan. I'm trying to go into the
Yeah.
Seedborn
No,
game.
that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. So it's
Uh,
like I totally get where you're coming from. I just think it's like almost the opposite angle that I'm
yeah,
seeing
no,
with
that
it,
makes
you
sense.
know?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can get behind that.
666.
Um,
So let's talk about Five Fairy because I know this has come up and we are talking about it. I have wanted to play this card for so fucking long, to be
yeah.
clear. Like I have really, really wanted to play this card for a really long time. And I think it's insanely well positioned in the current metagame.
Mhm.
Triple blue is a moronic casting cost, and I
I
hate
was
it.
just about to be
Yeah,
like, didn't we just get done talking about how hard it
for
is to
sure.
cross double black,
Yes,
right?
absolutely. But there is also a, like, I can't stress this enough, world of difference between two blue, blue, blue on end step
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
versus 2 black
Oh,
on main
100%.
phase, right? And
Um,
that's why I think Teferi is good, because I want to play the Thrasios play pattern as much as possible.
mhm.
And Teferi fits in there like Notion Thief fits in there, right? I don't want to play these cards in my main phase decks, right? In Timnacrom, fuck that. In like, decks like sometimes Tivit can be sometimes,
Mhm,
right? Like those are much more what I would consider main phase focused decks. When
mhm.
you play Thrasios, you inherently have much more
You
comfort
sandbag
locking
a lot
in
more.
all 4 turns as
Yeah,
potential avenues of success, right? Because Thrasios gives you that inevitability of just going like, all right, never had a window, pay 4, scry 1.
right.
So when I have the option of holding up Oppo, holding up Notion Thief, holding up Teferi, not threatening an Adnause, because Adnause I think just doesn't fit into the style that well, right? Because it doesn't convert as quickly, but it's still the same type of play pattern of like
Yeah,
you would be less confused if Thrasios held up a bunch of mana. You're not going to automatically go, oh, that's a Nause, right?
right.
Is sort of the idea here, right? So
Oof, 2.3 is your average CMC.
yeah, oh yeah,
Oof,
this would not be a good ad nauseum deck. I cannot
oof.
stress that enough. Is it really that high? Holy, oh
Without
no,
lands, yeah.
1.64 with
Yeah.
lands. Yeah, yeah.
That's,
That,
hefty,
yeah,
hefty, hefty.
yeah, yeah. This is unforgiving. I do
Holy
love that you
shit.
checked though. That is wonderful. But it
I was
makes
just
sense,
going
right?
down to
Because
because you were, like, talking
yeah,
about ad nauseam this, and
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
you
I mean,
got,
you got
like,
to look at your rights. Like,
multiple 5 drops
yeah,
in
five,
this.
five, five, 4, 4, 4, 4. Right, like
Like,
4, like it. Yeah, 7. It was not a good Nas deck, y'all. That's okay. And that's why Pete is fucking awesome in this deck
yeah, I
too,
think
right?
Peter
Because like,
slaps here.
yeah, and it's so funny too, because like obviously Orcish Bowmasters, Deflecting Swat, these are all things that I'm very much thinking about with this deck. Don't get
Mhm,
me wrong. And especially with PETA as a win condition, right? But like those are cards I now know I have to play around, right?
right,
Like that is a win condition I can circumvent with the deck. And if
right.
that's the case, if I'm worried about those cards, guess what? I'll just resolve a fucking kitten and win. You know what I mean? Like I don't give a fuck. So that's
I
something I'm enjoying quite a
think you
bit.
should be on Archdruid's Charm.
Was also thinking that,
I
like
think
to
if
the
you
point
cut
where
a
it may
permanent,
be better
it
than Wishclaw, if I'm being honest.
you what?
I think I maybe like it more than Wishclaw.
I could get behind that. Yeah. I
Done.
don't
Done.
I love Archdruid's Charm and green decks so
I do
fucking
too.
much.
I
The
do too.
card's
And it's
so
another way
good.
to get Cradle too, right? Like
Yeah.
just another thing to think about. Although, like obviously, Trip Green, you want to be playing a Cradle, but like honestly, the fact that we have
I
3
mean,
ways
we've
to
talked
get
about this so many times on the show of how, like, when we first looked at the card, we were like, Trip Greave's kind
yeah,
of hard. And then we're like, then
not
you
really.
play it and you're like, oh,
Yeah,
but you're playing in a green deck. And what do green decks make easier than fucking
yeah.
anything? Fucking green
Green
mana.
mana. Yeah.
So it's like,
Like straight up, a lot of green decks should just double check that they shouldn't play Nykthos, right? Because of how easy it is to just get green. Like,
honestly, yeah. Like,
like it's somewhat funny. Like it really is. Not this deck can't. I was just double checking.
yeah. No, but like the point being though is
Yeah,
that like you just make an enormous amount of
mhm.
green mana in green decks just
Yeah,
naturally.
yeah.
And
I
so
completely agree.
it's because of the way like your mana base ends up being very green slanted because you
Yeah,
want to support your dorks, you want to
right.
support your Thrasios, and
Yeah,
because of that, all of your dual lands end up being green X. And
yeah,
so with like the exception of like Underground Sea, right?
yeah, yeah,
And so because of that, like casting green spells, like big green payoffs like this is just fucking easy.
yeah,
Like it's not hard. Um and I have seen tons of people tell me that it's like, oh man, don't you think Archdruid's Charm is hard to cast? No, I don't think it's
yeah,
hard to cast. If it was like triple blue, like Archdruid or Archmage's Charm, right? And you were
yeah,
trying
yeah,
to play that in this deck,
yeah,
I would have a much harder time getting behind that. And I know we just got done talking about Teferi, but think about the like play pattern
yeah, yeah,
difference, right? Is like the thing you were talking about with the like end step.
yeah,
You can justify that big of a thing on
yeah.
an end step where you can hold it up. You're
Right.
still representing some amount of interaction, right?
Yeah, and one thing to throw out too about Teferi, right, is that like we are like as a community have such a boner for flash speed right now
Yeah.
that like it can't be underestimated, because I just talked about how much mana that this deck makes. There are probably times where I can still win by basically flashing in at this instant speed Grand Abolisher and then still flashing in creatures because it gives my creatures flash.
The thing that is so good about it too, though, is you started to go down this road, and I hope you were going to bring this up, and then you didn't.
Yeah.
Is it's so good in the flash meta because you can just fucking respond
Yes.
to people's Borns
By
and just be like, okay, Teferi, and they're like, huh.
Uh-huh.
And it's just
Layering,
like,
motherfucker.
fuck it up.
Yeah.
Like, this card is insanely well positioned. It's so hard though, because like in a lot of other decks, I have a hard time like looking at it and being like, how do I cast this? You know what I mean? Like, that is my biggest qualm with it. But like here, I think it's perfectly defensible.
Is that how that would work with layering?
What do you mean? If they like cast a
This is true even if a rule or effect allows sorcery to be cast at another time. Okay, there we go. That's exactly. Okay, cool.
It stops everything.
I wasn't sure if it was like a like last known thing.
No. It's a rule setting
Gotcha.
card.
Yeah, because I knew that's what I was thinking, because I know can't beats can as far as rules of Magic, right? Which, by the way, that's a really nice, easy rule to keep in your back pocket for cEDH while you're still learning. Is can't will always be can. I mean, it works for every Magic, right? Like that's from Mark Rosewater himself. But it's a nice thing to help yourself as a shortcut there for some interactions like that.
And it's specifically because it says you can only cast them at sorcery speed.
Yeah.
And the way that interaction works is it's not saying you can't cast spells; it's that you can only cast them at sorcery speed. Like,
understood. Okay.
It's weird, but that being said, like, this works to disrupt the people went real hard, like the Rog Sai player, right, went super hard on their Necro. And you're just like, okay, cool, Teferi. And they're at 5 fucking life, and you're just like, okay, cool.
Yeah. So yes, that is true. But also you have to remember that this does have the 3 mana Teferi templating too, right? So like, folks who are playing this at home, you better be packed full of counter spells, because it has to get back to your turn too. Right?
And I think that's my only criticism of it here is I don't know that you're enough of a control deck to use it in that way.
I don't think I am either, which is why my intent is 99% of the time to cast it at my, like, the end step before my turn.
Before your turn.
Yeah. It's basically a Dosen with flash in that.
I'm telling you, man, like, thinking about it more, I'm just like, man, is this a Tivik card? Feels real close.
Could be.
It feels real close. I think it's hard because that like 4 and 5 mana slot is like so really competitive in that deck.
Agreed.
But yeah, I think that's really interesting. I do like using it as like an instant speed Dosen, though. I think that's smart. No, I mean, I think that's really interesting. I think this is good as we kind of, look wrapping things up a little bit. Going into an event like this, and we go through these sorts of things, like, what is it that like the biggest thing I want to put put out to our audience is like why I enjoy doing these and why I think it's important for us to do these is it like shows, like, because quite frankly, there's just this kind of behind the curtain sort of stuff for us when we do these. Because you're really seeing what our conversations are like when we talk about this shit. Is a lot of us have like these, you and I have this conversation like a lot, and sometimes it's over text, but like, I think it's important for people because of the fact this is how you need to be talking with your friends and challenging each other on those things. And it's not in a like, I'm right, you're wrong way, which I feel like a lot of times it can get in with that. But this like collaboration, I feel like is very important for people.
Right. And this is why, like, I know Jeremy like joke, or no, it was you the other day who said, I don't have the exact quote. You're like, let me find it actually.
It's
that was
so far back. It's like weeks back, I think.
Okay.
The thing where I was just like, we're such a good group because Jeremy is irresponsible, I'm super responsible, and you're like, I forget what I said.
I think he said, and Ian's reasonable.
And Ian's reasonable.
And it's like, but genuinely, it's one of the reasons I love working with you two, because it's like, I am truly of the camp that I love working and listening to people I both agree with, but also that I vehemently disagree with. And you and I have had many times in this podcast where like you and I are 100% in sync. And then
Yeah.
on things like Shieldred, for example, right, where you and I could not differ more aggressively on
Yeah.
these opinions. And yet we still can find common ground in these conversations, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what you need in cEDH, right? Like I think you need people who are willing to challenge you in these things, right? Like Jeremy's our throw a million like ideas at the wall person. You're like you know, if it's not a counter spell, I don't want to hear it kind of person, right? Like
Hey guys, do you have 10 counter spells?
yeah.
Are you running 28 lands?
Yeah, exactly. And I definitely do come in with that. Like, Jeremy, I love what you're cooking with here. However, Cal is right. We can't play 55 drops. Maybe we can limit it down to maybe 4 or 5.
Us
but,
brewing Hashatod has been really funny because
Yes.
it is the deck. I can't wait for us to talk about this deck on the show.
Yeah.
Because I have come in honestly the complete opposite way of how I normally like play decks.
Yeah.
But it is so polar opposite the build Jeremy has been building.
Yeah, exactly. Like to a comedic degree.
It is very funny where Jeremy has just brought forth this deck and I was like, cool. Fuck all of that.
Yeah. But no, I think in general, like, you know, I have friends who are very heavy tournament grinders, right? But like, I find that we can have conversations that are constructive, and like your shrewdness on a lot of cards does allow me to be constructive of them and to be critical of things that I like a lot, right?
Yeah.
And like, even like you called Radstorm out before we even pushed it that hard, right? You were like, this is cool, but also like, I don't know that this might be a hat on a hat type of thing, right?
Yeah.
And it's good to have people who are willing to challenge you on that stuff, and I've really appreciated that. Well, I mean, obviously we're friends too, right? But like about our friendship, but also in the brewing space, right? And I think it's been a nice thing, and I think it's like find people who are good, right? Obviously that you want to work with, but also find people who are good at speaking with you.
Yeah. Well, and I think like one of the things I was going to say too with that is I think in large part that's why we are such good friends is because of the way we were able to communicate with, because it's like if you and I had a bad deck brewing relationship, I think that would be a really tough thing for our friendship.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that would be hard for us to deal with.
Yeah, super fair. I do definitely have friends who are like that, who I'm like, I love you as a human, but if you tell me another one of my great ideas is stupid again, I'm gonna smack you upside the head. Like it's not the same 100 cards I've been playing for 3 months. Okay, cool. Thank you so much.
And you know what? The way I always look at it as of like, okay, so I definitely gentle parent whenever you come in with something hot.
Oh, for sure. And I know when I come in with a full pile of garbage, right? Like there was that like Hypergenesis deck. I was like, listen, I know this is garbage, but
you threw that at me, and I was like, okay. Have we thought about? You can tell my wife is a therapist, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh man, Ian, if people would like to have help with their deck brewing with you, how could they get a hold of you to do so?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to thank all the people who've been patiently waiting, as I've had a couple crazy weeks in a row. You know, I had to leave for Colorado on Wednesday, so I basically was like, "Hey, everybody, I got Monday and Tuesday this week."
Yeah, I know. I was just like, I don't think we're doing the set review this week.
Yeah. But yeah, you can find me over at comedianmtg@gmail.com or use any of the links in the link tree down below. My DMs are open on most of those social media sites. Just feel free to hit me up on those places if you want to take that step up in your cEDH game. You know, I sometimes pause on the self-endorsement, but I realize it's a competitive market out there. So just throw it out there. I have more wins with different archetypes than any other player by a pretty decent shot.
Just kind of like straightforwardly have more wins than like any other player, kind of like straightforwardly.
You know, I definitely have a pretty stacked resume, more top 4s and top 16s. I think a lot of players, and I've been doing this longer than a lot of other players as well. But you know, there are also a lot of impressive players out there. But I think if you want, you know, a wide swath of experience that covers basically everything of cEDH, that's where I gotcha. So. Yeah, if you're interested in all that, find me at that email, comedianmpg@gmail.com, or any of those links down below, and we can set something up, get you that next stage in your cEDH gaming.
Yeah. if you want to support us here on the Mind Sculptors, you can go to patreon.com/the Mind Sculptors and help us there. Also goes a really long way to pay the offering to Algorithm Jesus and leave a like, a comment, and all of, if you haven't, subscribe. And you can comment now on Spotify too. Like, it has a comment section on Spotify, which is super interesting. We get a few comments over there. Like, the Spotify audience is definitely the I'm driving to work audience, which I totally respect. That's my vibe. But you can do those sorts of things. One story I want to share with you, because this just kind of popped in my brain before we go, is because my wife and I have been playing a lot of Baldur's Gate 3 recently, because I got a PS5 for Christmas.
Hell yeah.
And we're going through, and we just did the ruined temple where you meet withers.
Okay.
And I go, oh, great, we're going to meet withers. He's going to be the person who will let us respect everybody. And she looks at me and she goes, he's going to help us respect everybody? And I go, yeah, change their stats. And she goes, oh, I thought you were going to say that he was going to help us be respectful. I was very confused. I was like, yeah, Withers, he's going to help us be respectful to our followers.
Yeah, to be fair, when you said it at first, I thought you said respect as well, which I was like, not exactly.
So this is clearly a me issue.
Yeah. I was like, I don't think Wizards does that.
Yeah, no. He helps you respec your
your team. Yeah.
The other thing that I thought was very funny was when I put this in our group chat, was when she first met Asterion, and she was just like, I'm just gonna gentle parent him.
Oh man. Unrelated, I met him the other day.
He's so cool. I would love to meet him sometime. He's so cool.
He was very, very pleasant, and we have a very long conversation with him. But it was pretty cool.
Nice. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. I'm Cal.
Callahan.
Stay sculpty, everybody. See you next week.
Sculpt.